by saying you showed exemplary leadership in your earlier comments, and I appreciate what you do for this body. I've thought a lot about this, and why are we here on a spending bill, a CR, and an omnibus, when really the issue of the day is the Constitution. The men of 1787 could have set up a lot of different governments. They could have anointed a king. George Washington was really popular. They could have made him a dictator. They could have vested power within themselves, a small group of men on oligarchy. They didn't. Instead, they set up a government with clearly defined separation of powers. They set up a republic, if you can keep it, according to Ben Franklin. A government that's lasted longer than any other form of government in the history of mankind. Think about that. The issue before us is less about immigration and it's less about perceived amnesty or what the memo says or the memo doesn't say. It's more about the crossing of a sacred line that delineates power and separates power in three branches of the government. This document that I carry in my pocket spells that out. There are 17 enumerated powers that the legislative branch has, not the executive branch, not the judicial branch, that we have. And that's the power to make law. The legislative branch creates law, not the executive branch. And I feel like that line's been breached with this memo. Regardless of how we feel about the specific issue. And in the past, when the legislative branch has disagreed with the executive branch, they've used the power of the purse, because only we have the power to appropriate money. That's why we're here on this bill at this time, on a CR or an omnibus or a cromnibus or whatever we want to call it. It's a funding bill. And with the power of the purse, I think we owe it to our constituents, and we owe it to the founders that wrote this document to say, no, Mr. President, or no, executive branch, you can't cross that line. You don't have the power to do that. And we're going to get your attention because we control the power of the purse. I appreciate the analogy that the gentleman from Arizona had. I hope we do have the fight in January, Mr. Chairman. I believe we will, because our Constitution and the separation of powers continue to erode. And as a river erodes a bank, eventually that bank falls in. This Constitution and this government lasted longer than any others. I don't want to see it go away. I believe in it that much. I believe in this institution, the legislative branch and Congress, and why I ran. And I appreciate you giving me time. Many would say we're wasting the time of the Rules Committee by being here on an amendment that is set up that is not going to pass Rules Committee and is not going to be part of this funding bill, and we're wasting time. But no, we're not, because it's that important. It's that important to set the stage for future fights or have the fight today, but the fight is coming. And I appreciate the gentleman. I appreciate the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Mulvaney, who showed leadership on this issue. I support the Mulvaney amendment. I hope the Rules Committee will, because it's that important to me and my constituents. And with that, I'll yield back.
Well, thank you, gentlemen.
I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Wisconsin for a few minutes.